Imagine for a second that you're holding a single tiny seed in the palm of your hand.
Right, just a tiny, weightless little thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly small.
Yeah.
But inside that unassuming little shell is, well, it's the exact complete blueprint for an entire forest.
The towering trunks, the intricate root systems, the canopy, everything's just packed into a fraction of an inch.
You just have to know how to look at it.
Oh, right.
And it's the ultimate compression of information, where something vastly complex begins as something incredibly simple.
Right, but I take it we aren't looking at botany or biology today.
We are not. We are talking about human civilization,
Ugh.
and specifically a single word, like a linguistic seed that sprouted into an entire cosmic framework.
Oh, wow. That's a big claim.
It is. Today, our mission is to explore for you an absolute mind-bending linguistic aha moment. We are unpacking this fascinating paper by Siva Chirkupalli, and it's titled Brahma, Brahman, Brahmin and Brahmi, a cultural and historical exploration of knowledge traditions in India.
Yeah, this paper is brilliant. Throughout it, we see how a single ancient Sanskrit root
Yeah.
word didn't just, name a few disconnected things.
Right.
It literally built an entire civilization's framework for understanding the universe, grasping the nature of reality, structuring human society, and ultimately inventing the written word.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you are listening and you're looking for a shortcut to understanding the foundational philosophy of ancient India, and you want to do it without feeling overwhelmed by a mountain of academic jargon, you have come to the exact right place.
Absolutely. But before we can talk about the people who preserved the knowledge or the physical script they used to write it down, we have to start at the absolute beginning.
Like the scale of the cosmos itself.
Exactly. We have a look at the linguistic root that started this entire cascade. So in Sanskrit, there is the root word vidya, that's spelled BRH.
BRH, got it.
And linguistically, scholars trace this root to meanings like to grow, or to expand, or to become great.
Okay, so if you're listening, keep that concept of expansion in the front of your mind. That is our seed.
Right. And from that root, the first major concept we get is Brahma.
The creator deity.
Yes, exactly. In Hindu cosmology, there's a primary triad of deities known as the Trimurti. You have Vishnu, who is the preserver. You have Shiva, the transformer or destroyer. And then you have Brahma, the creator.
Which perfectly aligns with that root word when you think about it. I mean, creation is growth. It's the ultimate outward expansion.
Yeah, that's spot on. In the Puranas, which are essentially the ancient, vast collections of Indian mythology and lore, Brahma represents the very beginning of manifested existence.
Like the symbol of cosmic order unfolding.
Exactly. And the paper highlights how the term itself is deeply associated with greatness in this outward trajectory. For instance, the author brings up the expression Brahmanda.
Brahmanda. What does that break down to?
Well, it combines Brahma with Alanda, which means egg,
Oh, the cosmic egg.
right? The universe itself. But then the paper mentions another, even more specific phrase, Brahmandasvota,
Brahmandasvota.
which translates directly to cosmic expansion or universal emergence.
Yeah.
It captures a very dynamic, active view of how existence began.
Wait, that parallel is striking to me. I mean, Brahmandasvota, cosmic expansion, it sounds eerily similar to the modern scientific concept of the Big Bang.
It really does, yeah.
It's just fascinating how this ancient root word for expansion so perfectly mirrors 21st century astrophysical theories. Like, they were conceptualizing a rapidly expanding emerging universe thousands of years ago, using language that captures the exact same physical energy we describe today.
Yeah, the language they developed was incredibly sophisticated. It allowed them to capture the mechanics of physical existence. But the ancient Indian philosophical tradition didn't stop there. They pushed this Greek word further into the realm of the metaphysical.
Okay, where does it go next?
We see a shift to a slightly different term, Brahman.
Ah, notice the difference there listening to this. Not Brahma, the creator deity, but Brahman. On the surface, those sound almost identical, but...
But we're dealing with a completely different concept now.
Right.
Conceptually, the leap is massive here. If we look at the Upanishads, which are the ancient philosophical texts that form the backbone of Hindu thought, Brahman is not a deity.
So no face, no form.
None. It doesn't have a specific mythological role like creating the world. Brahman refers to the ultimate reality underlying all of existence. The Upanishads describe it as eternal, infinite, completely beyond form, and totally beyond ordinary human perception.
Wow. So if Brahma is the creator you can sort of conceptualize and name, Brahman is the invisible fabric of reality itself.
That's a great way to put it. And the deep, profound realization of this ultimate infinite reality is called Brahman, which translates to supreme spiritual knowledge.
The author points out an important distinction here, too, regarding how ancient Indian traditions divided knowledge into two distinct categories.
Yes, the difference between material and spiritual knowledge.
Right. First, you have aparavidya, which is material knowledge.
Which is, the practical understanding of how the world works, knowing how to construct a building, learning the facts of history, or balancing a ledger.
Basically what we would call book smarts. But then you have the second category, paravidya, and this is spiritual or ultimate knowledge.
Exactly. That is the Brahman.
It's the fundamental difference between, say, memorizing the periodic table of elements and experiencing a profound, life-altering enlightenment about your actual place in the cosmos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely changes how we view their entire educational system.
How so?
Well, realizing Brahman wasn't just an academic exercise for these scholars. Attaining Brahman was considered the absolute highest form of wisdom in Vedantic philosophy. The goal wasn't just to inform the mind, it was to fundamentally transform human consciousness.
Okay, but think about the logistics of that for a second. You have a society that has just defined the invisible fabric of reality, but a concept that abstract is incredibly fragile.
Very fragile, yes.
It's like if the person who understands it dies, the concept dies with them. How did they prevent this total loss of information before the invention of writing?
Well, you need a dedicated system of preservation, human keepers of the cosmos. And this is where we are introduced to the term Brahman.
Which again stems from that same root.
Exactly. Originally, this word simply denoted a person who was associated with sacred learning or great knowledge. You can hear that same linguistic root of expansion and greatness embedded right in their title.
But I have to ask, if these scholars are dedicating their entire lives to memorizing the cosmos, who is growing their food, it seems like an incredible luxury for a society to support a whole class of people who just, memorize things. What was their actual day job?
It wasn't just a luxury, though. Their occupational responsibilities were vast and highly integrated into the functioning of the society. Historically, this scholarly community played major roles in preserving an immense variety of disciplines.
Like what?
They were essentially the hard drives of their civilization. They preserved the entirety of Sanskrit literature, the Vedic hymns, intricate ritual systems.
All of it.
All of it. Astronomy, calendrical science to determine when to plant crops, the highly complex rules of grammar, and the various philosophical schools.
Okay, I have to pause and push back on this because logistically, my modern brain is having a really hard time accepting the mechanics of this.
Fair enough.
We are talking about an era long before the printing press, before the widespread use of paper. I mean, I can barely remember a 6-digit verification code for 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
How could an entire civilization's complex systems, from tracking the movements of the stars to debating nuanced metaphysical philosophy, be reliably preserved and passed down for centuries purely through oral transmission? It sounds impossible to do without massive corruption of the data.
Like a giant game of telephone.
Exactly. A giant game of telephone where the message just gets totally distorted over time.
It is a common misconception that oral history is just people telling stories around a campfire. What these scholarly communities developed wasn't storytelling. It was a rigorous mathematical system of oral algorithms.
Oral algorithm.
Yes. It was formalized in educational settings known as gurukulas, where the teachers and students lived together in a completely immersive environment.
So how did the algorithms actually work? Like, how do you prevent that game of telephone effect?
They treated human memory like an immutable ledger. To ensure not a single syllable or intonation of these vast texts was altered, they developed incredibly complex chanting techniques.
Okay, so not just reading a sentence out loud.
No, they didn't just memorize a sentence from start to finish. They broke it down into patterns. For example, in what is called the Kramapatha, they would chant words in pairs.
Pairs? Like how?
Like word 1 and 2, then word 2 and 3, then word 3 and 4.
Oh, wow. So there's an overlapping redundancy built into the recitation itself.
Exactly. And it gets even more intense. In the Ganapatha method, the chanting pattern is mathematically staggering.
Get me. What's the pattern?
They would chant word 1 and 2, then 2 and 1, then 1, 2 and 3, then 3, 2 and 1, and finally 1, 2 and 3 again. It's an auditory grid.
That is insane. That is basically a verbal checksum.
A checksum.
Yeah, in computer science, a checksum is a structural algorithm used to detect errors in data transmission. If you drop a single syllable, the entire mathematical pattern of the chant immediately breaks, eluding everyone in the room to the error.
That is precisely what it was. And they also paired these vocal patterns with specific hand gestures, mudras, and strict rules for breathing and pitch.
So they physically embodied the data.
Yes. Ancient Indian society valued the internalization of knowledge over the external storage of it. Because think about it, if knowledge was only written on a fragile leaf or carved into a stone, it was vulnerable to fire, flood, or decay.
It could be destroyed in a day.
Right. But if it was internalized, woven into the mathematical algorithms of the mind and the daily practices of a dedicated community, it became robust.
Okay, so you build an elite human supercomputer system. But that level of rigorous lifelong conditioning begs a very serious sociological question.
Wait.
What happens to a society when a specific occupational group isolates itself to memorize and preserve all this knowledge for generation after generation?
We see a shift. We see a shift from a fluid knowledge community into something much more rigid.
Right.
The institutionalization of these gurukulas eventually drove the transformation into a hereditary social identity. And this became a core part of the broader Varna-Jati system, more commonly known today as the caste system.
And just to be clear for the listener, Varna refers to the broad theoretical categories of society, while Jati refers to the actual specific occupational communities on the ground.
Correct. The paper points out the shift beautifully. And the key driver the author discusses here is the concept of endogamy.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't taken a sociology class recently, endogamy simply means the practice of marrying strictly within one's own specific social or occupational circle.
Right. And when we look at why these scholars began practicing strict endogamy, it comes down to a few very practical historical pressures.
You know, to wrap my head around endogamy, I keep picturing modern Silicon Valley.
That's an interesting comparison.
Like, if you have two software engineers working at the same tech giant, they have similar schedules, they speak a highly specialized coding language, their daily stresses align, so they marry, and their kids grow up totally immersed in that tech world. You don't just have a family of coders, you get a hereditary community where your profession starts to feel like your identity from birth.
That's a great analogy. And to take that analogy a step further, it was also about protecting intellectual property.
Oh, of course.
The complex rituals, the astronomical charts, the linguistic rules. This knowledge was the high technology of the ancient world. It carried immense social and economic power.
Because kings relied on them, right?
Exactly. Kings relied on these scholars for calendrical sciences, administrative knowledge, and ritual legitimacy.
So if you control the cosmic IP, you really don't want it leaking to rival families or outside communities.
By enforcing endogamy and marrying only within their specific scholarly lineages, they ensured that this highly valuable knowledge stayed within the family trust, so to speak. What started as an occupation, an educational pursuit to preserve the cosmos, eventually evolved into an inherited destiny to maintain an economic and social monopoly.
But the paper is careful to note that this phenomenon wasn't uniquely isolated to the Brahmins. Like, this wasn't a single group dictating terms to everyone else. It was a societal mechanic.
Right. This evolution happened across the entire societal spectrum. The paper lists other occupational groups that likewise formed hereditary identities connected to their traditional professions.
Like who?
We see it with weaver communities, barber communities, artisan groups, and agricultural networks. It was a widespread sociological phenomenon. If you were a master metallurgist, your smelting techniques were your family's livelihood.
So you guarded those trade secrets by marrying within other metallurgist families.
Exactly. It's so easy for us to look back with our modern lens and only see the rigid hierarchy that it eventually became, missing the pragmatic reasons it started.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Modern historians generally view caste as a highly layered and evolving institution. It wasn't the product of a single decree. It evolved through a complex combination of protecting trade secrets, kinship networks, regional customs, social hierarchy, political systems, and religious traditions.
It's just fascinating. The intent for the Brahmin community was the flawless preservation of sacred knowledge, but the byproduct of hoarding that knowledge within family lines was a highly stratified, stable, hereditary social community.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the cosmic root, we have the expanding universe, we have the ultimate reality, and we have the human scholars who lived in isolated gurukulas to mathematically memorize it all. eventually becoming a hereditary caste to protect the IP. But eventually, after centuries of this massive oral tradition, this expanding universe of knowledge finds a physical medium. We move from the mind to the stone.
Right. And this is where we arrive at Brahmi. The Brahmi script is among the earliest major writing systems used in ancient India.
When are we talking, timeline-wise?
To give you a sense of the timeline, the earliest confirmed inscriptions we have in the Brahmi script appear in the edicts of Emperor Ashoka, which date back to the 3rd century BCE.
The famous Ashoka pillars, carving laws, administrative decrees, and philosophies into massive stone monuments across the subcontinent. But wait, why move to stone after perfecting the oral algorithms?
Well, the scale of administration for an empire like Ashoka's required a standardized physical medium. You can't rely entirely on chanting when you need to broadcast administrative laws across thousands of miles to diverse populations.
Fair point. And Brahmi isn't just an interesting dead historical artifact either. It is essentially the mother of almost all modern Indian scripts.
Yes, the linguistic lineage is massive.
The daughter scripts born directly from Brahmi represent, well, we get Devanagari, we get Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Bengali, Gujarati. We are talking about the genetic ancestor of the written word for over 1 billion people alive today.
And when you look closely at the name Brahmi, the cultural and symbolic interpretation is immediate. There is a strong, deeply ingrained belief that links Brahmi, the script, to Brahman, the ultimate reality, and Brahman, the learned community.
The idea being that Brahmi was the specific script developed and used by these scholarly communities to finally physically record the sacred knowledge they had been carrying in their heads for centuries.
Right. It suggests that Brahmi symbolically represented their intellectual preservation.
But, and I know there's a but here.
There is. The paper presents a very important historical caveat right at the end here. While the cultural symbolism is beautifully aligned, historians and linguists debate the exact origin of the name Brahmi. There is limited verifiable historical proof connecting the creation of the script exclusively to the Brahmin communities.
Ah, so this perfect linguistic cascade might just be a later cultural attribution, like a society looking back and applying their most revered root word to their foundational writing system.
As historians, we have to rely on verifiable evidence. And the evidence for exactly who invented Brahmi and why it was given that specific name remains heavily debated among epigraphers and linguists.
So what does this all mean? Why does the author even spend time including the connection if the historical paper trail is inconclusive?
This raises an important question for you as someone actively learning about history. We have to learn the vital difference between cultural symbolism and verifiable historical evidence.
Right, because human beings love a neat, connected narrative.
We really do. We desperately want the idea that one root word beautifully cascaded into all these perfectly aligned concepts, and culturally that connection is incredibly significant. The association between the script, sacred learning, and knowledge preservation tells us exactly how ancient Indian society viewed themselves and their highest values.
We have to be careful.
Exactly. As critical thinkers, we must always keep a space open for the messy reality that history doesn't always fit perfectly into our beautiful linguistic boxes.
Yeah, that makes sense. The cultural truth that they valued knowledge so deeply, they naturally associated their foundational script with their highest spiritual concepts, is real and meaningful, even if the strict historical proof connecting them is fragmented.
Exactly. Whether theological, philosophical, social, or linguistic, all of these terms reveal the central, driving importance of knowledge traditions in Indian civilization.
Let's take a breath and connect the dots one last time for you. We started this deep dive holding a single tiny linguistic seed, the Sanskrit root ba, meaning to grow, to expand, or to become great.
And from that root, an entire civilization's worldview blossomed. We got Brahma, the cosmic creator representing the unfolding universe. We got Brahman, the ultimate, infinite, formless reality, and Brahmagyan, the profound, supreme spiritual knowledge of that reality.
Then we got the Brahmins, the human scholars who dedicated their entire lives and eventually locked their hereditary social identities to preserving that vast knowledge through the sheer mathematical discipline of the Gurukula chanting system.
Right. And finally, we have Brahmi, the ancient script that became the physical vessel for this expanding universe of thought, giving birth to the writing systems of modern India.
What we have explored today is an absolute masterclass in how a society's deep foundational reverence for knowledge doesn't just produce a few books. It physically and socially structures their entire civilization.
It dictates their cosmology, the evolution of their social classes, and their technology of writing.
To see how deeply ancient Indian society valued the transmission of culture across generations is remarkable. And it leaves me with one final thought, something for you to mull over as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
We look back at ancient India, and we can clearly see how their intense reverence for the expansion of sacred knowledge, combined with the need to protect their intellectual property, literally built their hereditary communities over centuries.
It shaped their entire social reality from the ground up.
So what about us? If historians looked at our modern society thousands of years from now, what single root word or core value would they say shaped our social structures?
Oh, that's a great question.
And are our modern knowledge communities, like the highly insular worlds of the tech industry or the exclusive bubbles of elite academia, are they silently building the hereditary social castes of the future by keeping their specialized knowledge locked behind high tuitions, closed networks, and corporate walls?
Are we writing our own social destiny without even realizing it?
Just like the blueprint inside a seed. We want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.